Right, advancing now into Unit 2 philosophy, we're going to be looking at good and evil. Firstly, we've got to just cover the concepts of good and evil and how these stem from God and the devil. The devil is usually referred to as Satan. So in Christianity, the basic teaching is that everything that God has created is good. Now, it's an undeniable fact that there is evil in the world. So if God has only created things that are good, then there must be a source or a power of evil that isn't God, and this is referred to as the devil or Satan. And now we must actually raise the question, so that if there are these two different powers or sources of good and evil, then which is the most powerful, good or evil? Now, usually, obviously, the most logical answer in Christianity would be to go with that God is the most powerful because he's omnipotent. Unfortunately, in philosophy, it's not as simple as that. We must look into a bit more detail than to just give a simple one-worded answer of God's omnipotent. And we can do this through something called the legend of Frost. And this is the idea or the principle that to get what you want, you sell your soul to the devil. Now, this would suggest that raise the question that does desire actually lead to the devil having more power over us than God, in the sense that we don't actually go to God to get what we want, we go to the devil and we give him our soul. Now, the legend of Frost is actually a story. It's a German story, so most people's response would be, well, this is a fictitious legend, it's not true, people don't actually go to the devil to do this. However, many people have been believed to actually have done this in the past. Okay, and an example of this is a man called Robert Johnson, and that's him there. He's a blues musician and is unfortunately not with us anymore. He died at a very young age. I believe it was 27, and he has been believed to have sold his soul to the devil to become very successful in the blues. And this is mostly stems from the fact that he was a black man in a very racially abusive society, and he needed nobody would appear to accept him for his brilliance and talent in the blues. He's not the only person that has appeared to have done this. The general pattern is that the people who have sold their soul to the devil appear to die at a very young age, and 27 is certainly a young age. And moving on now, we've got this idea stemming from the story of Job. Does good and evil, or God and the devil, actually work together? Do they come hand in hand? And if you want to go into a bit more detail about the story of Job, I've got a link for you here. Just follow this and it will take you straight to an explanation I've done in a previous video about it. Moving on now, we've got to talk about the fall, the original sin, and redemption. Now, there's a brief story I just need to clear up with you about the fall and the original sin. Okay, there was once an angel Lucifer. He was cast into hell by God. Okay, there's reasons behind this. If you want to look into that for yourself, go ahead, but I've got to move on now. Lucifer is now referred to as Satan or the devil. In the Garden of Eden, God tells Adam and Eve not to eat from the tree of knowledge, but Satan, now in the form of a serpent, tempts Eve to do otherwise. When Eve eats the fruit from the tree of knowledge, she makes Adam do the same, and this is known as the original sin. Now, there are two types of versions of the fall that we need to know about. There's the fall of the angel Lucifer, which is where he falls from up in heaven with God, surrounded by all this all-perfect environment, into hell, and that comes from this book here called the Apocrypha. And the Apocrypha is basically an accumulation of Christian and Jewish textures and writings that doesn't appear or isn't deemed suitable for the Bible, because it's pretty clear that most of it wasn't pretty logical. There was like dark magic and giants and things in the Apocrypha, and the fall of the angel Lucifer was one of them. So that's one version of the fall, but the fall that you need to know about, that OCR have labelled here for us, is that the fall is where Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, and this is the fall from this is the fall in humanity, where we fall from this all-perfect environment of the Garden of Eden, and we fall down into a sinned world. Now some people believe, mostly Christians, that the original sin is one of the things that has actually led us humans to be born without holiness, or without this lack of holiness, and this is all due to the original sin. Now that we've got the original sin cleared up, we need to just take a brief look at redemption. I have done redemption in a previous video. There's a link for you here if you want to go to that. It's not as detailed as this, but in the story of Corinthians, we learn that Jesus died on the cross basically to save people from the punishment of sins of humanity, and on top of that he actually redeemed them. And now we've got to look at the problem of evil and some of the responses to it. Now before we go into that, there are two types of evil. Okay, there's moral evil, and this is actions of people that are seen as wrong, cruel, uncaring, such as the unfortunate case of the Holocaust. And there's natural evil. Natural evil are events that do cause harm and can be seen as cruel, but they are not actually brought about by humans. Okay, these are things like your volcano eruptions, your floods and hurricanes. Right, so the problem of evil stems from, if God is omnipotent, omniscient and omnibenevolent, as you would have known by hopefully seeing my Philosophy 1 video on beliefs about deity, why does God let suffering exist? Now, in case you don't know, omnipotent is all-powerful, omniscient is all-seeing, and omnibenevolent is all-loving. So if God is all these things, why does he let suffering exist? These are some of the responses to it, okay, because this is the problem of evil, and some responses come about that the natural evil is not actually God, okay. Natural evil is brought about by the devil. Not a particularly great argument, given that if God is supposed to be omnipotent and all-powerful, surely he should be able to stop the devil. There's this other idea that suffering can make you learn from your mistakes, and the mistake for humanity being the fall of not of angel Lucifer, but of Adam and Eve eating the forbidden fruit. And there's this idea that the suffering brought by evil can actually lead us to God. So if a relative has died and we suddenly get angry at God for letting them die, at least this is actually acknowledging that he is there and this is true. Now, I believe it was in a university lecture or some form of lecture, there was a lecture going on where someone was saying or talking about God's responses to evil and all this about it's to help us learn from our mistakes and to lead us to God, and someone spoke out and said something that basically diminished the entire argument. And odd as this may seem, this one question was, then why do fish get cancer? Now this, weird a question as this may seem, this actually brings down this entire argument completely, and is a very good one to be using in your exam for the contradiction section in your question E. Because why do fish get cancer if this is the reason for suffering? Okay, what have they got to learn from the mistakes? They didn't eat from any forbidden tree of knowledge or anything. They didn't. They don't have the conscience to acknowledge God. Okay, and also since this holy connection between God is with humans and not between God and animals, why would God be bothered at all if fish don't worship him? Okay, well, why does God want fish to acknowledge he's there? So the fact that animals and fish all suffer, or mostly sea creatures suffer, just brings down this entire argument completely, because it's not just us that suffer in the world, it's also animals. And now we can also go into questioning, is God all powerful at all? And if you want to follow this link here, this will take you to a argument I've developed upon in a past video I've made called what was it called? The Paradox of the Stone, that was it. Right, so a few more problems, responses to the problems of evil are the following. Okay, we've got this philosopher here called Epicurus, and he has delivered this quite famous quote of his, and this sort of his responses to the problem of evil sort of suggests that God is not omnipotent, but it also questions on whether or not he's actually worthy of being called a god, and is he actually malevolent. And I think I'm pronouncing that right, malevolent, yeah. And in case you don't know, malevolent is almost like evil, essentially. It's to be evil upon people. And the quote goes along the lines of, is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? That basically means then why is there evil if he is both willing and able to stop evil? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? So that's his version of trying to respond to the problems of evil. He's almost labelling or sectioning off God as with different characteristics. And other responses to the problem of evil, Epicurus aside, will be God does not exist. Now, this may not seem a pretty logical way to get about suffering for Christians, but unfortunately, due to things such as the Holocaust, many Jews have actually lost their faith in God. So that's one response to the problem of evil. Another one is that he's not all-powerful. Links to my paradox of the stone that I was talking about earlier. And we've got this idea that God is actually responsible for everything, not just good. So all this evil that's going on, he's responsible for that as well. Okay, this includes evil and suffering as well as good. And the idea that a response to the problem of evil is that God is causing this evil as a punishment for the original sin. But then we can raise the question, well, hold on, if God made Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden all perfect, then why did he allow the original sin to happen? Because that is essentially what would have happened if they were truly perfect. And we've got this Christian saint, I believe he's a saint, Irenaeus, and he said that we need to suffer. Okay, it's a necessity so that we can almost be forced to choose between good and evil. If we didn't make this choice is the key thing here. If we didn't make this choice, then we'd essentially be like automated robots, okay, that are just programmed almost to worship God. God doesn't want this, okay, he wants us to choose to worship him. Otherwise the true faith isn't there. But now this also raises a contradiction of, well, why is there suffering with babies then? I mean, they don't have the conscience at the moment to recognise or understand God. And we've got St. Augustine, and he actually has put across that suffering and the problem of evil, this is nothing to do with God, okay? Stop blabbering on about God about this, okay? Evil is just what is left when humans lack good. Okay, so his view is that, and tackling of the problem of evil is that let God off the hook here, okay? It's nothing to do with him, it's all us. Now there are different ways that Christians have managed to cope with suffering, and this is one of the topics that we need to discuss. The main one is prayer. Okay, that's a pretty simple one that you can easily remember that in the exam, I would hope. So one way that Christians cope with suffering is through prayer. And another way is that they can put it into perspective, their suffering. They can put their suffering into perspective. So this would essentially mean that realising that while they may not be able to afford a bottle of water that easily, they've actually got life a bit easy compared to those in Africa that have to walk about 5 miles or so just to get unclean half the amount of water that they can afford. And another way is that they can assertively accept it. Now, assertively accepting it is almost like taking it on the shoulders. You sort of like accept it and buck up to the suffering and say, right, I'm going to take this in a positive attitude and I'm going to try and use it to my advantage. Okay, and Monty Python have portrayed this rather well in their song Look on the Bright Side of Life. I wouldn't go quoting Monty Python in the exam if I were you, but this is just a little link I'm giving you here in case you haven't quite got the gist of assertively accepting it. Follow this link and you'll sort of get the idea that even in the worst circumstances of death, you can still assertively accept that suffering on that scale. And finally, we've got to look at sources and reasons for moral behaviour. Now, in Christianity, there are 3 reasons. These are the Bible, faith in Christ, and conscience. Now, the Bible, you can easily find this online. The 10 Commandments in the book of Exodus show reasons for moral behaviour. And you've also got the 2 Great Commandments delivered in the book of Mark 12:28 to 12:31. And this goes along the lines of the one Great Commandment is to love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your strength. And the second one is that you should love yourself as well as love thy neighbour. Christians would follow these and attain moral behaviour through the Bible in the examples of the 10 Commandments and the 2 Great Commandments. We've also got this idea of faith in Christ, and this is where atonement comes into it. And the way you might want to remember this is the way it's spelled. So you've got at one meant, at one moment, and this is essentially when Jesus' death atoned the sins of humanity, and essentially that was all done at one moment. Okay, all of those sins were atoned at the point that he dies on the cross, and all of those at that time who accepted that he was the Son of God therefore have a chance of getting into heaven. So that's another reason for moral behaviour, so that they can have a chance of getting into heaven, and that all stems from atonement and their faith in Christ. And finally, we've got the idea of a conscience. Okay, and this is to many Christians, their conscience is known as a voice of God, and they have been known in the past to just say they know what to do, and that essence of knowing stems from the belief that they are essentially having their thoughts channeled by God. However, it is worth noting that many Christians don't actually believe that the conscience is a voice of God, so that can be another contradiction in section E. Okay then, that's me done here, I believe. Yep, right. I will hopefully be seeing you again soon in my next and final video for Philosophy Unit 2, Religion and Science.